You are listening to The Investor's Guide to Scorpio Ranch and Phoenix Bloom by Sasha Wallace. Narrated for you by Sasha Wallace. Donations to paypal.me/Bloom Healing. Inquiries bloomhealing22@gmail.com. The locations of the Home Tree Farm eco-villages are Sunsite Ranches in Arizona and Gunsight Ranches in Texas. Chapter 6. The Black Zone. CO2. Part 1. What's the cost of carbon pollution? In a quote from 8billiontrees.com, the price per ton of carbon credits, i.e. the cost of carbon pollution, in 2023 is between $40 and $80 per metric ton. The price is determined by the carbon credit market, which comprises companies and investors who buy and sell carbon credits. The price fluctuates depending on supply and demand, as well as the impact enforced by net zero emissions goals set for 2025, 2030 and 2050. Also, there are compound challenges faced by unabated deforestation and wildfires. In addition, there are compound challenges faced by unabated deforestation and wildfires, where the stored CO2 in those trees is released back into the atmosphere. As a global community, we have a lot of work to do to mitigate the damage being done by these external market factors. In another quote from gazette.gc.ca, these rates reflect the annual increase in the price on carbon pollution. There is a planned annual increase of $15 per metric ton charged on your CO2 emissions from now, 2023, until 2030. From a starting position of $65 per ton in 2023 to 2024, based on a mean average between $40 and $80, I've arrived at $65 as a starting point. This will rise from $65 per ton in 2023 right up to $170 per ton in the year 2030 to the year 2031. So let's look at this year on year. This is the price you will pay in US dollars on your carbon pollution over the next 8 or 9 years. $65 per ton in 23 to 24, $80 per ton in the year 24 to 25, $95 per ton in 2025 to 2026. Note that this is going up by $15 each year. In the year 2026 to 2027, it will be $110, and then $125 per ton in 2027 to 28, $140 per ton in 28 to 29, $155 per ton in 29 to 30, rounding off to a huge increase, that of $170 per ton in 2030 to 2031. In very simple terms, the earlier you start to reduce your carbon footprint, the less you will pay. The price of carbon pollution beyond 2030 will certainly be astronomical, especially if you haven't met the emission reduction targets that are required if you are to make a genuine impact by the net zero deadline of the year 2050. Black Zone CO2, Part 2. How do we manage carbon pollution? A quote by climatetrust.org. The analysts at Trove predicted that the voluntary carbon market, or VS, Black Zone CO2, Part 2. How do we manage carbon pollution? In a quote from the climatetrust.org, the analysts at Trove predicted that the voluntary carbon market, or VCM, could grow to $1.9 billion in value just in 2023. The Independent.co.uk produced a quote to say the same volume of offsets and credits purchased in 2022 for 38 million English pounds will cost 483 million English pounds by 2030. This is an increase of 1,051%. Prices under this scenario were forecast to continue rising to a peak of 2.6 billion English pounds in 2037. In a quote from 8billiontrees.com, most prices of carbon credits are well below the 40 to 80 US dollars per ton of CO2 emitted, otherwise known as carbon pollution, needed to keep global warming within a 2-point degree, as set by the Paris Agreement. Far higher prices for carbon credits, for offsetting and carbon removal, will be imperative to achieve global targets. But first we need to understand the landscape. Number 1, carbon offsetting. Number 2, carbon removal and storage. Number 3, carbon removal offsets. There's been conflicting reports about these terms in recent years, including several cases of deliberate misinformation that has caused distrust in the industry. In some extreme examples, a few companies who were producing high levels of carbon pollution were duped into investing millions of dollars in carbon offsetting projects, only to discover that they were not real and were merely numbers on a page with no scientific basis for their impact. We need to restore trust with those investors who were and still are committed to reducing their carbon pollution and get them back on board in order to provide tried and tested examples of successful carbon reduction and removal projects to those industry and domestic partners who are just getting to grips with their net zero goals and their intentions between now and 2030, so that the absolute deadline of 2050 can become a reality. Paying attention to how we reduce greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is probably the most important problem we must solve to ensure we have a healthy planet for future generations to enjoy. To move forward with reducing carbon emissions and removing carbon permanently, while making our lives more sustainable and affordable, check out the plans for your area in the Inflation Reduction Act 2022. It's vital to ensure that the carbon reduction projects we're planning are genuinely sustainable and measurable, so that industries and individuals buying carbon credits have confidence that their carbon pollution is being reduced or removed or both, and most importantly that the environmental benefits of these projects are really being generated. Black Zone, CO2, Part 3. What is carbon offsetting? Number 1 on our list. Offsetting CO2 emissions. Carbon or CO2 is absorbed naturally by trees and soil and can be stored underground. Some soils store up to 8 tons per acre at a depth of 10 feet. Offsetting is about identifying sustainable projects that help to balance out CO2 carbon emissions being produced in another area. These projects can be located thousands of miles away from the CO2 emissions that they are offsetting. Example 1. A landowner could receive royalties or income payments from a green lease by hosting one wind turbine on 1 acre of their land, while earning credits for carbon offsets in the soil and using regenerative grazing techniques to feed cattle underneath the huge wingspan of the wind turbine. Example 2. A landowner earns carbon credits for keeping their land undeveloped and can receive additional green lease payments from a solar farm, i.e. 2,000 solar panels installed across 1 acre of pasture, and also have the space to grow flowers that attract honeybees and other pollinators. Carbon offsetting does not tie up your land, so it can be used for a wide variety of purposes and income streams, all resulting from the same acre of land. Back in July 2021, one carbon credit was trading for $16 per metric ton of CO2 stored. Depending on the land location, soil type, and tree canopy, 1 acre can absorb between half a ton and up to 5 or more tons of carbon per year. Check out the incentives and tax rebates for your particular area as detailed in the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA. If you're a US resident living in Texas, you can benefit from tax relief and lower monthly bills by switching to renewable energy, and you may be eligible for free installation of solar panels and power walls on your property, moving you to the point where you could even be selling your surplus energy back to the local power grid. Some IRA incentives are geared towards those switching to electric vehicles for their home and business. Since every automaker is required to cease production of new petrol, gas, and diesel engines and diesel engine cars as soon as 2030, and certainly by 2035, this is an area of sustainable energy that impacts every person and every country in the world. Check out our Green Zone chapter for a deep dive into electric vehicles and an industry standard charging port becoming available for all electric vehicle drivers between 2023 and 2025. This exciting move forward in the EV market underpins our aim to install a Tesla charger station at both of our eco-village locations in Texas and in Arizona, so that we can offer electric vehicle charging capability to our very special eco-community of residents and visitors. Black Zone, CO2, Part 4. What on earth is green leasing? Green leasing is the term given to landowners who lease their land to other companies and individuals who need extra space to generate renewable energy or to create a farmstead, grow crops, or support eco-friendly educational projects. there are opportunities available for you to lease land at our flagship property, Scorpio Ranch, in an area of natural beauty where all hunting and trapping is forbidden. We're even going so far as to invite sustainable home builders to join our off-grid community. Located at Gunsight Ranches in Sierra Blanca, Hudspeth County, West Texas, we have reserved a full 9 acres of our 53-acre footprint for the development of Home Tree Farm Eco Village. That leaves 44 acres available for green leases currently arranged in 1-acre parcels, and they can be used for the following: solar panel installation for domestic and business use, wind turbine farming and hydro aquifer irrigation, vineyards for wine growing and grape harvesting, orchards for fruit and olive growing, arable land for growing vegetables, fruits and herb gardens, regenerative agriculture for grazing animals in a protected wilderness reserve, and secluded plots for building off-grid homes with sustainable materials. And the list goes on. How broad is your imagination? Here is a case study for solar farming in action. In theory, 2,000 solar panels could be installed on 1 acre of land. 1 acre is approximately 4,046 square meters. So 1 acre of solar cells will produce 4,046 kilowatt hours of electricity each hour, or 24,276 kilowatt hours per day, based on 8 hours of sunlight per day. The tasty natural juice giant Naked use 1,824 solar panels to power their entire bottling facility in California, providing the energy equivalent of the yearly usage of 51 homes in the US. Plus, their eco-friendly square bottle holds more juice than rounded bottles do, which is more efficient, and is manufactured from 100% recycled plastic. They call it a renewer bottle, and so the recycle continues. You can learn more about renewable energy alternatives in the White Zone, called Gambling with Solar Energy. Black Zone, CO2, Part 5. What is carbon removal storage? The second on our list. 8billiontrees.com says it takes between 31 to 46 trees to remove or store 1 ton of CO2. TerraPass.com says an acre of land used for carbon sequestration or other methodologies for reducing a carbon footprint generally removes 0.2 to 1.5 metric tons of carbon annually. If carbon credits are currently worth $16 per metric ton, the landowner can expect $3.2 to $24 per acre per year, which is 0.2 times 16 equals 3.2, and 1.5 times 16 equals 24. The market trend is already priced between $20 to $70 per year for carbon credits, with CO2 offsetting projects starting at the low end to carbon removal storage projects at the high end. Reforestation is planting trees in the same area where they have burned down in a fire or where they were cut down for timber. Afforestation means planting trees in a place where they were not present previously. Heavily forested areas can hold as much as 3, 4, or 5 tons of CO2 per acre in trees alone. If you have mature trees on your property, then this already counts as CO2 removal and storage. Our personal commitment to CO2 carbon removal is the planting of 2 forested areas of new trees, aka afforestation, and the community will be invited to plant your own tree at both of our locations. Eastwood Forest is planned at Scorpio Ranch in Texas, and Westwood Forest is planned at Phoenix Bloom in Arizona. I like to think of these planned woodlands as our special CO2Go project. The east and west designations of our forests signify their proximity to Ciudad Juarez in Chihuahua and El Paso in Texas, a thriving community either side of the Mexican border with the US border. Scorpio Ranch is 2 hours drive west to El Paso, and Phoenix Bloom is 4 hours drive east to El Paso. You can see the map in our red zone, placing the city sites of Ciudad Juarez, El Paso, Fort Bliss, and the Franklin Mountain Range at the heartland of our home tree farm family. In the boxes on the side, we've got 2 lists of what to look out for if thinking about your own forest planting project. Trees that are good at storing carbon include the common horse chestnut, the black walnut, the American sweet gum, the ponderosa pine, red pine, white pine, the London plain pine, the Hispaniola pine, the Douglas fir, scarlet oak, red oak, Virginia live oak, and bald cypress. And guidelines to consider when designating trees for a CO2 removal project include: choose fast-growing trees like coconut palms. Choose long-lived trees. The older the tree, the more efficient it is at carbon capture and storage. Trees with large leaves and wide crowns. Trees that are native species to the area. And trees that are low maintenance and disease resistant. Black Zone CO2 Part 6 Forest Bathing. Pause here for a few moments to take in the crisp, clean air that these beautiful forests give to us. Better still, find a real tree and soak up their goodness and their shade. All trees soak up CO2 as carbon dioxide, which humans and animals produce every time we exhale and breathe out. It is a loving, symbiotic relationship built on harmony and balance that heals us inside and out. The extra hard work that trees do is by absorbing and dissipating the toxic carbon of CO2 emissions that are clogging up our atmosphere, mostly from the fossil fuels used in planes, trains, automobiles, ocean tankers, ships and power plants. Well, it's simply supernatural. Let's say thanks to the trees, please, and do our part. Black Zone CO2 Part 7 Beyond the Forest. Carbon capture, storage, biological sequestration, or CO2 storage are all names for the same process. Once captured, carbon can be dealt with in a number of ways. On the previous page, we looked at the ways trees store carbon, and this natural process is the most beneficial as humans need the air, the gases of oxygen and nitrogen to breathe that trees release into the atmosphere. Some other processes that capture carbon CO2 are known as CCUS, carbon capture, utilization and storage, and mechanical engineering innovations known as DAC, or direct air capture. Storage involves pumping the CO2 into the ground, removing it from the atmosphere permanently. Current advances for CCUS include concrete production, using captured CO2 as part of the concrete production or curing process, which reduces the volume of cement needed in the concrete mix. Production of cement generates high levels of CO2 emissions itself, so reusing CO2 in this way offers additional benefits for the environment. Utilization refers to several processes which use captured CO2 to avoid using other compounds. For example, enhanced oil recovery, EOR, injects CO2 instead of water into the ground wells to manage oil extraction. Class 2 wells, for utilization, are used for enhanced oil recovery, or disposal of waste fluids, or storage of liquid hydrocarbons. However, only wells used for EOR would qualify as CCUS. Class 6 wells, storage wells, are used to inject CO2 deep into rock formations as permanent geologic sequestration, removing CO2 from the atmosphere and the carbon cycle. The commodity price of CO2 will change depending on whether the CO2 is injected into a Class 2 or a Class 6 well. A Class 2 well may be paid from $60 to $130 depending on the CO2 source. A Class 6 well could earn from $85 up to $180. Lastly, we're going to look at carbon removal offsets, which was the number 3 on our list at the beginning. Carbon removal offsets denote companies that invest in both types of CO2 management at the same time, i.e., CO2 offsetting projects, which was number 1, alongside CO2 removal projects, or number 2, such as storage, utilization, and direct capture, etc. For example, a company is paying carbon credits to a renewable energy farm to offset their existing carbon emissions, and they are using carbon utilization methodologies to reduce the impact of their carbon emissions. NB. Prices, estimates and challenges accurate at time of writing in summer/fall 2023 and are subject to change as the world moves towards a greener, cleaner and more sustainable future for all. You have been listening to The Investor's Guide to Scorpio Ranch and Phoenix Bloom by Sasha Wallace. Narrated for you by Sasha Wallace. Donations, paypal.me/Bloom Healing. Inquiries, bloomhealing22@gmail.com. The locations of the Home Tree Farm Eco Villages are Sunsite Ranches in Arizona and Gunsight Ranches in Texas. We can't wait to see you soon. Thank you.